All right, let's kick this off. Welcome, everyone, to an installment of Industry Icons, Upwave's event series that shines a well deserved spotlight on leaders in advertising and media who have had noteworthy careers. Simply put, our intent is to highlight accomplished voices in the industry who have had the most interesting things to say. I'm Chris Kelly, founder and CEO of Upwave, the brand outcomes measurement platform. I'm honored to be joined today by Josh Chasin, who is a well known industry executive, well known to many, if not all, of our audience today. Josh has had quite the illustrious career in ad measurement, including stops at places like Arbitron, Simmons, Scarborough, Comscore, VideoAmp, along with advising numerous companies and sitting on the boards of various industry bodies. And Josh currently provides consulting services under the brand of Not Simpler. Quick housekeeping note for today. We will leave time for questions from the audience at the end. So if you have a question for Josh, please be sure to drop it in the Q&A button below. So Josh, welcome and thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Chris. And I just wanted to say two things. One is I'm honored and privileged to be here and be your first guest in this series. But I will also say that industry icons really amps up the pressure.
It
And,
does.
industry regular Joes would have been much easier on my end.
Yeah. You know what? I can submit that idea to marketing. Maybe in post prod, they can cross that out and put industry regular shows. But we'll see. We'll see where the content takes us, and maybe we'll let the audience vote at the end for whether this is iconic or regular Joe-ish. But I know it's leaning towards the former. So let's start with one proof point of what I would say is your iconic career. So you were recently inducted into the Market Research Council Hall of Fame. Now, I know you were too humble to talk about what that means for you. So I will ask you, what does that mean for ad measurement? What does this induction say about where ad measurement has been and where it's going next?
I think pretty clearly it speaks to the triumph of style over substance, first of all. I, I yeah, yeah, I think that, so here's the thing. I've been a member of the Market Research Council for some time, and there's kind of been, I don't want to say warring camps, but there's been two distinct factions on the Market Research Council, which, by the way, was founded in like 1927 by people with names like Starch and Roper and
Oh,
Gallup
wow.
and Nielsen.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So it's got a serious pedigree. And I think over time, what happened is there's like market research, and because it's for long been New York City centric, advertising research, media really. Um, so I guess I would say I hate to say my induction has something to say about the industry, but I guess if anything, I would say it has to say that audience measurement, media measurement, advertising analytics is an essential part of this broad-based discipline and science that we think of as market research.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And you name checked some of those Mount Rushmore faces in
Yeah, I tried to name only people who have companies named after them.
but yeah, plenty of people who did not put the company in their name from 100 or so years ago that I'm sure have had a lasting impact. But let's flip then to the other side of the continuum. I know you have worked closely with a number of ad measurement startups over the years and through today. So what's one common lesson you've learned seeing so many different approaches to starting a measurement company up close?
Yeah, so I was thinking a lot about this, and at first I was thinking, oh, learned this from that, I learned this from this other place. But I think if I was going to offer you one lesson, it is going to be the importance, and especially from the perspective of a startup. So look, I worked at Comscore and I worked at VideoAmp, and at both companies, I would characterize them, at least when I joined, as tech startups in the measurement space. So the lesson I learned is the importance of velocity. Okay, the asset of velocity, forward motion quickly. And I remember when I was at Comscore, having a meeting with another industry icon, Jack Wachschlag, who at the time was at Turner. And he was talking to me about wanting us to move a little more slowly in the world of like providing impact data of the change and enabling more preparation. And he said, when Nielsen makes a change, they give you a year. And I thought a lot about this. And what I ended up saying to Jack was that I've spent a lot of time at advertising measurement companies, and especially syndicated audience measurement companies, where the work it's measure once, share with multiple entities, as opposed
Yep.
to a custom research company. And I said, you kind of have a choice between too fast and too slow.
Yeah.
And nobody can, you get the thing about nobody goes at exactly the perfect speed for you. And if your choice is too fast or too slow, you want to pick too fast pretty much every time.
Yeah.
I've come to believe. So honestly, from that conversation with Jack, it's really crystallized into a lesson for me about the importance of velocity in
Yeah.
a startup.
No, I love that. I think that's true outside of even measurement startups for all startups. Upwave went through the Y Combinator program years ago, and a partner there mentioned that they thought the number one predictor of a startup success was their weekly velocity. Just what do they get done in a week? Might be moving in the wrong direction, so might be moving too fast in the wrong direction, but the companies that can move quickly are the ones that are going to win over time. So I think that's a
I'm also a big believer in failing fast, right? Like if something's not going to work, know it quickly.
yeah. And I think if I listen to the market and I'm sure you hear complaints from customers about moving too fast and too slow, but the last few years, at least, most customers have complained about some of the industry giants moving too slow, at least in measurement and currency. So I think that your err on the side of too fast, if you have to pick a direction to err, is good advice for everyone. So I love hearing that. Let's move to a more recent topic. So, you have been co-authoring Sim's study on the economics of TV currencies and presented there last week at Sim's event. So, can you give our audience an update on that? Specifically, what are some of the biggest tensions emerging between buyers, sellers, and measurement vendors? Or what are some things that surprised you from your co-authorship work on that?
Sure. So I want to say a few things first. One is SIM, for people that don't know, is the Coalition for Innovative Media Measurement. It's owned now by the ARF, and the executive director is uh, John Watt, who has been instrumental, of course, in both
Great.
giving us the work and working with us on it. I also want to acknowledge my colleague Manish Bhatia, who I've known for years and worked with for a few years at ComScore, who's my co-author. And we did a lot of interviews with the industry. Okay, so here's where this is coming from, right? So we know that we've we're we're sort of moving into a quote unquote multi-currency age where there's Nielsen, which has been the dominant, perhaps exclusive currency in television measurement really since there was television, at least at the national level. And now there are other companies who are vying for business in the national currency space. Those companies are ComScore, VideoAmp, and iSpot. At one point, it was clear they were in that space, and now I think it might be the case that they've shifted their emphasis from currency to ad impact. But I would still include them in the set. So constituents of SIM, let's just call that buyers and sellers of advertising, want to understand what's going to happen here. What do the economics of national currency look like? Is there enough money to support multiple currencies in the long term? And uh, what might happen? Like who might survive? What are the gating items? So I will share with you some of what will be key findings and that we presented last week in our deck. One is that when you look simply at the dollar volume spent on audience measurement on national currency, I should take a step back and say, what do we mean by currency?
Yeah.
Um, Currency is the data that is used in executing a transaction. So it's not the same thing as measurement. It's not the same thing as activation. So fundamentally, the advertising transaction is dollars for eyeballs. I know how many dollars there are. How many eyeballs are there? And when you agree, buyer and seller, on what that number is, the provider of that number has become the currency. They're in the transaction. So The dollar volume in the space is large. Estimates are 1.5 to $2 billion a year in the US. The sense
Hmm.
generally also is that's going to dwindle, largely because, well, competition tends to shift power to the buyers as opposed to the sellers of commodities, in this case, measurement. Um, we also spec'd out prototype or sort of typical cost charts for mounting a currency measurement company. What are the components? What does it cost? Net, net, what does it take to compete? And I will tell you that if you simply take the dollar volume, and then divide it by the cost to compete, unambiguously, there's enough money for multiple currency providers. However, that's not the end of the story, because we know that um, Nielsen commands a massive share of
Yeah.
that dollar pie. And it is very challenging for, so basically, I've heard stories about networks and agencies where 85, 90% of their research budget was going to Nielsen. And they, well, let's talk about the agencies first. The agencies are reluctant to change currencies, at least for age gender, for linear TV. And I'll share an anecdote from when I was at VideoAmp, which is when I was at VideoAmp, let's say it's 2023, we were putting out persons numbers, and we noticed before we pulled the switch and let them go, that we had a different age skew profile than Nielsen did. And eventually we convinced ourselves that we were actually right. And I thought, and by the way, we thought there was more 18 to 49-year-olds and less 50 plus year olds than Nielsen showed. We thought this would be universally acclaimed news, great news.
Yeah.
Largely was on the sell side. The agencies resisted. And
Hmm.
finally, one agency researcher, and I really give this gentleman a lot of credit, he said to me, look, let's suppose I think you're right. Translation, he thought I was right. How do I tell my clients I've been misallocating their money for the last 30 years? So we've come to believe that there's a phenomenon called switching costs for agencies. My historical data is no longer of use to me. I have to change how much I'm spending on the client's behalf. I have to change the cost per point numbers that we've been using for 40 years. So, and I have to manage the questions with my clients. So
Yeah.
it became clear that the agencies are reluctant to make the switch. Now, here's the interesting thing, because this is another finding, and then I'll kind of stop and say, for the rest of the exciting news, wait till the paper's published. But here's the other thing: is I am told that but one of the I want to preserve the anonymity of the source, but it's a well-known and reliable person in this context who tells me that for network TV transactions, like 90% of that is age gender still.
Hmm. Wow.
But of the other 10%, 90% of that is on video app.
Really
Right?
interesting.
So the agencies are not reluctant to use alternative currencies for what I call advanced TV, streaming,
Yeah.
um, advanced targets. And I'm pretty sure the reason is because there are no switching costs if, on something you're really just starting to do. And,
Yeah.
and therefore, to some extent, the, the market for alternative currencies, one of the variables that's going to determine how successful that marketplace is the pace with which transactions move from traditional linear age gender to addressable advanced targets.
Yeah. I love this. And I need to jump in with a Zoom joke. I think because of all the industry lingo we're using, I literally just got an alert from Zoom saying, I don't think you're speaking English. Should I change your transcription? I've never seen that alert in Zoom.
Oh,
I
geez, I get that all the time. No, I'm just
I
kidding.
got I was surprised enough I took a screenshot to show you afterwards. That was funny. But I love that. There's so much there. I could spend 6 hours on follow-ups on that. And I love the point you made about the what I call the embarrassment switching cost of the admitting you are wrong portion of switching costs, which we have seen in different parts of measurement, not just
Mhm.
currency. When you prove someone that metrics they've used for decades are wrong, and they say, "Why? Who's going to tell the CMO we've made the wrong
Right,
decisions
right,
for
right.
decades?"
But there are
Funny.
pragmatic things you got to deal with that are beyond, a strict methodological evaluation.
Yeah, yeah. No, I like that. And let's double click on the streaming portion you mentioned. So I remember that at CTV Connect, you actually challenged the premise that streaming and CTV actually need a traditional currency as it's been historically defined. So can you unpack your comments there for our audience? What does CTV need to transact and plan with confidence, if not the same definition of currency that linear needed for
Well,
decades?
here's the thing. Here's the thing. So I'll try to make this particular rant of mine as short as I can. So in the beginning with broadcast, it was based on spectrum space, which was a limited commodity owned by the public and licensed out. And if you had a license to spectrum space, you put a big stick in a field and then you just cash checks. And that was a great business. If you had a license, you made money. There was no such thing in the 50s and 60s as a TV station not making money. And then cable came around, and that got scary because, oh my God, now there's not going to be just the 6 channels. There's going to be like 36 channels. And that can't be good, except it turned out it was good because a lot of the broadcast companies ended up just making their own cable networks. So they had multiple brands on the shelf. But also, um, now they had must carry and retransmission. So actually, the cable operators had to pay the broadcasters in order, for the privilege of bringing their shows into my home.
Yeah.
So now they got to cash checks before they sold an ad. Um, as far as audience measurement was concerned at this time, when you had your stick in a field and just cast it out into the ether, the audience was a priori unknown, right? There's no way to know it. If a third party didn't count the audience, everybody was kind of stuck. Unfortunately, an industry emerged around doing that. Now, enter streaming. So, a couple of things are happening here. One is that uh, streaming is now based on bandwidth, which is not a scarce commodity, but it's a commodity with a cost. So if you're in the broadcast business, instead of free distribution over your antenna or paid distribution where the cable operators had to pay you, now you have to bear the bandwidth costs to get Law and Order SVU into my living room. So that changes the economics of television in general and brings and sort of shifts the power from the traditional broadcast companies to companies like Meta and Amazon and Google, who command the majority of the advertising money in the US right now. The thing about streaming, which gets at the point you're asking, I think I've exited my rant, is in broadcasting, audiences are a priori unknown. I would argue that in streaming, audiences are a priori known.
Yep.
I
Yep.
am Hulu. I know exactly how many streams I'm sending and to which accounts I'm sending them. And then maybe I know a bunch of stuff about the account holder. I had, in the course of doing the paper that Manish and I are completing, um, one network researcher said to us, my willingness to pay prevailing rates for currency is directly inversely proportional to the share of my impressions that are distributed via streaming.
Yep.
And that's why, right? Because in a
Yeah.
world where you empirically know how many streams you sent and to whom, the need for traditional ratings is far less critical.
Yeah. Yeah. We have ad service. I completely
Yeah,
agree.
yeah.
We've been arguing this at Upwave for a couple of years. We had a piece in the Drum in 2023, which I think it took us a while to shop because people didn't want to hear this in 2023. Basically, your argument that when you have an ad server, you can start from scratch and have a different paradigm of currency. Sure, you still need co-viewing. Sure, you still need some auditing and third-party validation that the counting is correct. And sure, still need audience insights into who is sitting in front of the TV. But the idea of starting with anything but the streaming data, with the ad server data, as opposed to starting with a third party taking a model of how many people saw it,
Yeah,
seems silly.
yeah, yeah.
Streaming world. So I think that that view is becoming true, and I think that and I think that's what we're hearing from CTV providers as well. So I loved
Mhm.
your quote there about the inverse ratio.
It's
So
not
I
my quote, but I can't say whose it is because we promised that.
we'll give that anonymous person credit. So, I guess a related question then is, as if we are leaving an era of measurement where all this energy was devoted to counting about currency, which I think we had I don't know, 3 to 7 year stretch where the measurement panel at every single industry conference was simply an alternative currency panel. Now we're seeing a shift to outcome. So can you talk about that? How is that shift going as the industry has to not obsess over counting impressions, reach frequency as we move to the streaming world, and we have to talk about outcomes, about business outcomes, behavior outcomes, brand outcomes. What's your take on that?
My take on that is that currency and outcomes measurement are two distinctly different things, and the outcome measurement is of paramount importance. But I'm troubled by the notion that outcomes should replace currency because if the way I look at it is if I'm a TV network and I get paid based on outcomes, now before I put your spot in the middle of my biggest primetime show, I better creative test it
Yeah,
because I don't want to get paid less for this really valuable piece of inventory because A, your commercial is not that great, or B, nobody wants to buy that thing.
yeah,
So I've now advertisers 100% need to track in as minute detail as they can all the variables that go into their messaging and the outcomes that are derived from everything from awareness through sales. But and and I also believe that sellers need to do everything they can to support that measurement. But when you're dealing with pricing inventory based on outcomes, you know, for example, some brand categories uh, are more elastic with respect to purchase based on messaging than others. And
yeah,
so all of a sudden, if I'm a network, I don't want to sell my inventory to the non-elastic categories. I want to make sure I'm selling it to categories where they are almost, if the spots there for decent, they're almost certain to see an outcome. So because inventory is a fixed commodity, I'm wary of making the sell side price it based on outcomes because then it's in their best interest to test the creative and before they put it on there before.
yeah. They can't take the risk of bad creative. Yeah. No, I think it's different conversation. Should
Yeah,
outcomes
yeah,
be measured? Of course, our outcome
absolutely, yeah,
guarantees,
yeah,
but
yeah.
our outcome guarantees and pricing on outcomes is a separate conversation. Then should we measure?
Right, right. Like this chunk of inventory on this show costs X. It shouldn't cost less or more than X because you did well at buying it. However, you should decide whether or not to buy it based on how well it does
Yeah,
for
yeah.
you.
Correct. Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's an accurate perspective. So last standard question for me, then we're gonna pivot to some fun, quick lightning rounds, and we'll get to our Q&A. And thanks to those who have popped into the Q&A. And reminder, there is a Q&A, so please add any questions you have for Josh. We'll get to some of them shortly. So my last standard question, Josh, is about Aquila, where you joined last year as fractional chief research officer. So can you give us the quick overview of what Aquila is, what's the vision, and what do you think will determine if it succeeds or not if we look a few years out?
Yeah, sure thing. So Aquila, and I'm going to say this because after I say this, no one's going to forget it, rhymes with tequila. Um,
Good branding.
Aquila, so the World Federation of Advertisers, which is you can kind of think of as the global ANA, Association of National Advertisers, they underwent a project from like 2018 to 2020 uh, at the behest of the world's largest advertisers who made a priority deduplicated reach and frequency across platforms. So the WFA developed a a methodology, an accepted approach for doing this. And then upon completion of the codification thereof, The next step was that it was to be fielded or implemented in the US through the ANA and in the UK through ISBA, which is predictably the ANA of the UK. ISBA created an entity called Origin. The ANA created an entity called Aquila. Aquila's mission is exactly that of the WFA, which is to develop and make available to advertisers cross-platform deduplicated reach and frequency. And the key thing is, I'm going to say, including the walled gardens. So now you can do, so the vision is to be able to have an advertiser look at the campaign distribution of reach and frequency, at the impression level, including, thus far, Meta, Google, Amazon, and TikTok are participating. In addition, Comscore is participating as the provider of linear TV data. Aquila is now in trials, should go live early next year. And the other key thing about Aquila is that and the WFA vision is that it is by and for advertisers. So the notion is that historically, media measurement is paid for by the sell side. In this case, a model has been designed where it's primarily funded by the advertisers, and therefore they, really, they're everybody's customer when you get right down to it in our industry. And so this enables them to have a say in how measurement is created for them.
That's great. It's important work, and I know the whole industry is excited to watch your growth of Aquila over the next few years, and maybe subconsciously be drinking more tequila every time we hear about it. So I'm going to jump to the Q&A as we move into the last few minutes. So this is a fun one. It's from an anonymous attendee, so we don't know if they have a horse in the race. So you mentioned the too fast to too slow continuum, that is how the errors companies can make in the measurement space. So an anonymous attendee wants you to give a grade to the following companies on either too fast, too slow, or Goldilocks just right.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is the Goldilocks
The
theory.
Goldilocks
Yeah,
question. iSpot, Comscore, Nielsen, Hyphometrics, and Videoamp. So those five, what are your five grades?
Okay, say them to me one at a time, and then I'll give you that one.
iSpot,
iSpot's pretty fast.
Comscore.
Hey, I'm a customer of Comscore. Yeah.
You can plead the fifth.
I think though that it's fair to say right now they're too slow, a little bit too slow. I love them guys. I love you guys, but you've got
Public feedback from Josh is good. Nielsen, which I have a guess of how to answer Nielsen.
The thing about Nielsen, let's not kid ourselves, is it's you're steering the ocean liner,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Nobody has ever said, yeah, I hate Nielsen, but they are quick and nimble.
Yeah,
that's not a thing.
And Hyphometrics and Videoamp.
Hyphometrics, I am a fan of. Joanna Drews, who is the CEO of Hypha, is a colleague and a friend. I've been paying attention to Hypha since before they were Hypha. Hypha moves quickly. They are probably, they've been like a lot of startups. They've made the choice not to take a ton of money, and so they've managed to move as quickly as they can given the money they've had. But I think that Hypha would be categorized as quick and nimble.
Yeah, that's great.
And Videoamp,
former colleagues.
yeah. No, we were. Hey, when I was there, we were moving fast, very fast, and I don't know what their customers would perceive today, but I'm inclined to think that they are still fast movers. Although the challenge you have is the more successful you have, the harder it is to move faster because there's more and more client constituents you have to meet the needs of.
Yeah, that's true. Easier to move quickly with a smaller client book.
Yeah, it's way easier to double revenues when last year you did $300.
That is true. That is true. And another Q&A, that actually was one of our lightning rounds. So basically the same question. If you look back on your career, what have been the most important lessons you've learned?
That is like one of our lightning round questions. So I think For me personally, these aren't necessarily generalizable, but for me personally, I'll offer two, and they both came from Steve Morris, who was my boss at Arbitron. I'd probably call him the best boss I ever had. One of the things he taught me was that a lot of times in interviews or in performance appraisals, you're asked, what are your like five biggest strengths and biggest weaknesses? What he told me, and I really believe this, is that typically people have one or two really strong core defining personality traits, and that those traits are accounting for both their strengths and their weaknesses. Therefore, it's important to understand what those core defining traits are of a person, because those will govern both what you're good at and what you're bad at. And I will also say that ever since he taught me that, and he taught me that during my first performance appraisal, I always ask that when I'm interviewing for, when I'm doing a job interview. The other lesson that he taught me was, and this is about management, and he was sending me off to run a new project. And he said to me, remember, you're in charge. It doesn't mean it's your job to have all the answers. It means it's your job to make sure all the answers get surfaced and the best ones win. And I believe that
I
devoutly.
like memorable lessons.
Yeah, yeah.
And, all right, we are over time, but I'm gonna sneak in three quick lightning questions for anyone who can hang on before our show gets bumped or preempted by the local affiliate. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What time's the football game start?
yeah, exactly. Before the NFL preempts us. So, three quick lightning round questions. One, a measurement term you think the industry should retire forever.
Yeah, there's one I hate, incrementality. I blame Rick Bruner for that. He, he's a good guy, and I like him. But here's the thing: it's not a word. Okay, it's not a word. Incrementalism is a word. Lift is a word. So I'd love to see. I'd be very happy if I never heard incrementality again. That's just a pet peeve.
Well, as a fault, we'll have to have you and Rick on a presidential style debate on stage on that term.
Yeah.
How about if you had a magic wand, what's one thing you'd fix about the measurement industry overnight?
Oh man. You know, I think this is a little bit colored by the most recent sim event, but I think what I would try to fix is to figure out some way to change the industry quicker, right? Like I mentioned earlier, the notion of velocity. And, okay, so what do we have? We have the MRC. I'm a fan of the MRC. We have the JIC. We have the VAB. But like, we ask questions like, what should the industry do? Well, let's convene some sort of forum. We have to figure out a way to move faster together in the right direction. And, I'm not sure how to do that. But I think that a co-opetition and a willingness to collaborate, even with your competitors, is important. And, for example, like I was hoping the JIC, when I was at VideoAmp, was going to seed a bunch of shared resources, because they were talking about a streaming asset that certified companies could have access to. And I thought, oh, that's going to be awesome. If we could cooperate on a set of shared resources, that makes us all able to move more quickly. So I think we have to figure out how to collaborate better together in a forward motion.
Yeah, that'd be a good use of the magic wand.
Yeah.
Last question. You can plant some seeds into the brains of any future entrepreneurs listening. So if you were to start a measurement company today from scratch, it's a new measurement startup founded by Josh, what would it focus on?
So here's the thing. In all honesty, I came close to being a part of that at VideoAmp, right? So because like when I got there were a bunch of clever kids doing some smart things, but didn't really know how to build a big time big boy service. No gender bias intended in that comment. But what I think is I would think of it as not so much as a measurement service, but rather as a data integration hub constructed around identity. I've come to believe, and this is a lesson I took from VideoAmp, I've come to believe that identity nowadays is the single most important aspect of how good a data source is, because um, really what we're doing is we're taking things like set-top box data and smart TV data and ad server data from platforms and uh, outcome data in many cases, and appending it, making it all work together by appending it to a spine, an identity spine. And I think if I was building my own measurement company from scratch, it would be all about the spine.
Yeah.
And the highest quality identity spine possible. And by the way, it might be a faux or synthetic spine because we've got privacy concerns. And I will just say that's a core component of what the WFA designed and what Aquila is doing. But whether it was a synthetic or a real identity spine, I would build it around the identity spine and then maximize opportunities for using that identity spine to integrate different data, exposure data, ad serving data, outcome data, demography. And it's not unlike what many companies are doing now, but I think really my message here is identity first.
Yeah. I like it. Well, maybe for any VCs listening in the
Yeah.
audience, that's
I,
a good
I,
way to write a
I
check.
should also, I just want to offer one more caveat before we go, which is I could be wrong about any and all of this stuff.
I like that. A dose of humility and all that. So a
Well,
cat
I'm probably
in,
not, but I could be.
in theory, one could.
There, yeah.
We appreciate that dose of humility spread over a very, very impressive career that sounds like with your startup idea, maybe you're just getting started. So, with that, we will break and we thank everyone for joining us today on this installment of Industry Icons. Josh, thank you for being our
Oh,
icon.
my pleasure. Anytime.
I have decided it is not indeed industry regular Joes. We're going to stick with industry icons, certainly for you. So thanks for your time today, Josh. Thanks for everyone for joining. Thanks for the Q&A, and we will see everyone around the industry soon.
Bye, everybody.